So thank you, and thank you for coming this early. Again, I'm very delighted to be asked to speak. I think it's so important that Columbia University has initiated in this program in spirituality and education. So many people working in this field in different institutions feel they work alone. They don't feel support. So have an institution like Columbia having this kind of program should inspire other, hopefully, institutions to make similar initiatives. I just came back from Korea, where there was a conference on holistic education. So this is a global movement. The only problem is, as some people indicated yesterday, we're still on the margins. We still have to make every effort to bring this into public education. That's my mission. I do have a connection with New York City. I did my teacher training in what seemed like another incarnation at the Harvard MAT program in the mid-'60s, and I taught 1 year in Scarsdale High School and then would come into the city. I love New York City. I'm so happy to be here for this weekend. So I'm going to talk about education and the soul, and I'm going to first of all talk about what I understand the soul to be. And I'm going to talk about it not from like a religious point of view, but from an experiential point of view. How do we experience soul every day in our lives? And then how can we nurture the soul in students, in our classrooms? So we could have the first, yeah. So here are two quotes. Again, I love Emerson, and he wrote so beautifully about the soul. And he said, education is drawing out the soul. And second, Stephen quoted Rachel Kessler yesterday, who wrote a wonderful book, The Soul of Education. And she said, when soul enters the classroom, masks drop away. Seeing deeply into the perspective of others, accepting what is felt unworthy in themselves, students discover compassion and begin to learn about forgiveness. So again, I encourage you to read her book. So first of all, what is the soul? First of all, it's an energy. We can feel the energy move within us. When we listen to certain music, each of us has certain music that moves the soul. Of course, there's soul music. Or we have experiences that being in nature, and we can feel the soul move, and we feel a lightness of being. We can also feel it contract when we feel under threat. And of course, we can feel it, we can see it in other people. Some people have such a strong soulful presence. Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King Jr. So, and there's also the phrase, the eye is the window of the soul. And if you look into the eyes of many people here in this conference, you can see the soul. And again, what is the soulful classroom? It's where you can see the light in the eyes of the student. The soulful classroom is an energetic classroom. It's where students want to be there. They feel nurtured. They feel nourished. So again, soul is an energy which we need to nourish and cultivate. The second thing about the soul, it contains our deepest longings. And one longing is to find meaningful work where we feel that we're making some kind of contribution to the earth. And it's so important that again, there's a thing called career education where you fill out a form and then they match that up. But we need to talk to young people about finding work that is meaningful. And the wonderful thing about education and teaching is that we can reach the soul in our work. Not every profession brings soul to the front. But you as a teacher, you as an educator, every day in your classroom, you can touch the soul. And I think the most powerful education experience is when the teacher's soul connects with the student's soul. Those are the moments that we look for as teachers. So the second thing that the soul longs for is relationship and love. And I've written a book about love and compassion, and I talk about 8 different forms of love and how they can be manifested in education. But I can only talk about a few here. So the first is self-love. And yesterday we heard a lot about how young people do not love themselves. There is a lot of self-loathing or self-doubt. So the most important thing that we can do is to help young people love themselves. And how do we do that? One is to help them see that they are part of creation. Creation is beautiful. It's wondrous. To look at the cosmos and the earth, that's creation. That's the mystery of life. And we all need to see that we're a part of that. That we have our own beauty as part of that. And the next thing is that meditation and mindfulness are also helpful. Because one definition of meditation is making friends with yourself. Meditation is learning to accept all part of yourself so that you love yourself. So these are the things that we need to do with young people today. Self-love. Then there's personal love, romantic love. And we can laugh about romantic love, but that first time you fall in love is a very powerful experience. It's the first time a person really will begin to care about the well-being of another person because they want to be with that person and they want that person to be well. So it's something to be honored and to explore it in literature. And Linda Carroll has written a book about the 5 stages of love. Also, young people need to know that that's just the beginning of a relationship. And there are going to be ups and downs in any long-term relationship. So, romantic love. But then there's another form of relationship. This comes from Japan. My wife is Japanese. They have a term, En, N. That means a mysterious connection with another person. You meet somebody, almost initially you realize you have some kind of connection. And right here at Columbia University is an example of N, where 2 people came together and wrote the Course of Miracles. And that was 2 clinical psychologists, Helen Schuckman, who had this vision that came to her in dreams that she had to write this Course of Miracles. And she was an atheist, but she went to the head of her department, Bill Thetford, and said, I have to write this down. So he got this little corner office where they would meet, and over 7 years, she would write notes and Bill would type it out. And that led to the Course of Miracles. That's an example of N. People coming together, and of course there are other. Annie Sullivan and Helen Keller, Emerson and Thoreau. And in your own life, you will meet people that you have N with. And sometimes it's not always a happy thing. Because indigenous people talk about the thunder being that comes into your life and challenges you. And so the work of the soul with a thunder being is to work with that, not to run away. And sometimes the thunder being can be a student in your class. And in Waldorf education, they ask the teacher to stay from grade 1 to grade 8, so that you have to be able to work with that thunder being. That's powerful soul work. Then there's impartial, and then finally there's friendship. That's another form of love. And in the day of Facebook, we need to talk about what friendship really is. You may have like 200 friends on Facebook, but let's face it, they're not real friends. A friendship is a long-term, embodied relationship I'm 76, and I was thinking about, I would say I've had 10 or 12 real friends in my life. So I think with young people, we need to talk about what is friendship. Okay? So then there's impartial love, compassion for all beings. The Dalai Lama looks out in the audience and he realized that everybody in that audience does not want to suffer and wants happiness. And that's true for all beings, animals as well. And as soon as you realize that at a deep level, you feel a natural compassion for all life. And you want in some way to help relieve suffering when it arises. So impartial love. Then love of learning. We know that very young children they naturally learn. They learn language naturally. They love to learn. But unfortunately, our schools do not support curiosity. Susan Engel has written a book called The Hungry Mind, which talks about curiosity and how we need to nurture curiosity in classrooms and not just be covering material all the time, but stimulating the child's curiosity. And finally, cosmic love. And at the end of the Divine Comedy, Dante, he writes, my instinct and intellect were balanced equally. The right and the left brain were balanced equally. And he said that love moves the sun and the other stars. That love is the animating principle of the universe. And again, King and Gandhi constantly talked about that. How love was at the center of the cosmos. And when we have that experience, hopefully, and each of us, I think, in some point in our life, and of course the saints and the sages, they usually experience cosmic love more than the average person, but even us, we experience this at times. And when we do, the soul sings. And I think one of the outcomes of education, we're in the time of outcomes, should be the singing soul. So at graduation, so again, one of the goals of education should be joy. Thoreau said, surely joy is a condition of life. So at the end of what's graduation from high school or whatever, university, the soul should sing. But it's not all love and light. There are times in life where we go down. There's inevitably loss in life. Our parents die. A relationship ends. A pet dies. So we go down. That's more soul work, not to be pushed away. And there's this book written by Philip Simmons, who had Lou Gehrig's disease before he wrote it before he died. It's called Learning to Fall. We fall from our ego. We fall from our carefully constructed identities, our reputations, our precious selves. And what do we fall into? We fall into passion, into terror, into unreasoning joy. We fall into humility, compassion, emptiness, oneness with forces larger than ourselves, into oneness with others who we realize likewise are falling. We fall at last into the presence of the sacred, into godliness, into mystery, into our better, diviner natures. So if there is loss, it's important that the soul works with that. And I think in our culture, we run from that. With drugs, with alcohol, on TV, So it's work that we need to do. That's part of life. And yesterday, one of the persons talked to what the Buddha said, life is suffering and the relief of suffering. So when the suffering arises, we have to be present to it. So how does the soul learn? It learns through contemplation, not through analysis. Contemplation is a non-dualistic way of knowing where we behold something and become what we behold. That is, we are with something, and actually, as we are with it, it becomes part of us. And so, one of the most beautiful descriptions of this comes from a book by Jacques Lusseron, And There Was Light. And he was born before World War II, and as a child, he became blind. But when you lose one sense, the another one can become stronger. So his hearing was very acute. So he was recruited into the French resistance. And so to interview people, to see, he could tell whether they were lying or not. But he missed somebody. And he was sent to Buchenwald. But he survived Buchenwald, and he wrote this wonderful book, which I highly recommend, And There Was Light. And he said in the book, being blind, I thought I should have to go and meet things, but I found that they came to meet me instead. I've never had to go more than halfway, and the universe became accomplice of all my wishes. If my fingers pressed the roundness of an apple, each one with a different weight, very soon I could not tell whether it was the apple or my fingers which were heavy. I didn't know whether I was touching the it or it was touching me. As I became part of the apple became part of me. And that was how I came to understand the existence of things. That's the way that we learn through contemplation. Touching the tomatoes in the garden and really touching them, touching the walls of the house, the materials of the curtains or a cloud of earth, is surely seeing them as fully as eyes could see. But it's more than seeing them, it's tuning in on them and allowing the current that they hold to connect with one's own like electricity. To put it differently, this means an end of living in front of things and a beginning of living with them. And that is a very powerful metaphor for holistic education, that we live with the knowledge, with our students, with the community. And then finally, never mind if the words found shocking, for this is love. Now here's somebody that went through the worst experience of the 20th century and the way that he relates to the universe. It's the way that we can all relate to the universe with love, a very deep love. So the next one, yeah. So how can we nurture the soul in students? There are many ways. I can't talk about all of them today. But one is a curriculum for the inner life. So journals. And some of you may have seen the movie years ago, Freedom Riders, which was a woman teaching in Long Beach, and she basically had two gangs in her class. And she had them eventually keep diaries, keep journals. And it's a wonderful movie about how sharing those diaries brought these people together. And journals can be used in so many different ways. One of my former colleagues at the University of Toronto had, in math, keep journals about math phobia. And then autobiography, having students write their stories. And there's a wonderful book called Small Victories. It's about Jessica Siegel, who taught in New York City, and again, a very challenging part of New York. And at the end of the first month, she had them write their stories. And she said after she read the stories, she said her students became her heroes. That is soul-to-soul connection. That's what we look for. Storytelling. Storytelling, I'm talking here, is you telling stories as teachers. And there's, again, in Frank McCourt's book, Teacher Man. He, again, his first year of teaching, he'd come out of NYU teacher education, and the first day of class, one of the students threw a sandwich on the floor. And he said, well, they didn't tell me what to do with the sandwich at NYU. So how he got through that first year was he told stories about growing up in Ireland. And of course, there was the movie Angela's Ashes that was based on his life. And what he said was that telling the stories was the way he connected to the students. So he said, my life changed my life. My life saved my life. By telling about my life, I was able to survive that first year. So I encourage you as a teacher to share some of your life. Don't hide it. Of course, that could be overdone, but I think there's, don't make it an ego trip. And then visualization, using imagery, particularly images of nature, which can be very healing. And then dream work. Again, a student that was in my class, and she did her doctorate. She taught English, and she had the students keep dream journals every night. A dream journal is that you try to remember what you dream, and then you wake up and you jot it down. So she would have at least one or two students every day share their dream journal in class. And then she wrote her thesis about all the good things that happened from that. And she said it really helped them through adolescence. And we know how difficult adolescence is in terms of problem solving, again, self-image. But again, so in the dream, you're contacting the soul. And finally, meditation. And of course, this is being much more accepted now in schools. But one of the best, again, descriptions of this comes from Naomi Baer, who wrote a short piece called Just 1 Minute. She actually was teaching math in Minneapolis. And again, it was a difficult class. And she had the students just at the beginning of class meditate for 1 minute. And then after they did that, to thank themselves. And of course, at the beginning, they thought it was foolish. But after a while, they began to look forward to the 1 minute. And then there were students from other classes that heard about the 1 minute, and they wanted to come. And then she even ran into people towards the end of the year in the grocery store. The parents said, that was the best thing for my student, the 1 minute. How deeply we want to have some silence in our lives. So other things that can be done, of course, the arts, nature, but any subject can be taught soulfully as long as the teacher is fully present. If the teacher is fully present, the soul will arise. So going to the last one. So I think it's so important that teachers do some kind of inner work to work on their presence. So since 1988 in my classes, this is before mindfulness became the thing, I required my students to meditate every day for 5 to 6 weeks and keep a journal.